All right. Hello. My name is Bridget, and welcome to my first podcast focused on strengths. And looking forward to this conversation today with Michael. Okay, Michael, you're going to probably have to help me out here, but your name is a challenge. Mnatsakanian. Kanyan.
Oof, you did.
Mnatsakanian. I think I got this.
Well,
Maybe not so much.
it's Mnatsakanian. No,
Mnatsakanian.
no worries though. You're not the first or the last person to have a little issues with that.
Yeah, a bit of a struggle. So thank you for understanding. It's a
Yeah,
challenge, but very excited to have you with us here today. And I know that our audience would love to get to know a little bit about you, right? Kind of understand, your background, and would love to hear a bit about that before we dive into kind of your creative engineering background, and of course, real estate investing and so forth. Uh, and so why don't we do a bit of an introduction for you?
yeah, definitely. So once again, my name is Michael Mnatsakanian. I'll say it one more time just to help everyone out. So it's Mnatsakanian. So I'm at a really high level. I'm a real estate investor and personal finance enthusiast. I'm an Army veteran. I got out not too long ago, and I'm also a chemical engineer by trade. But I've always worked in the environmental engineering space, even with my time with the military. So
Thank
the
you for your
field.
service, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then, as I mentioned, I've always really been interested in personal finance, whether it's for the goal was always early retire, and the plan was to do it through just investing in index funds and just let compound interest do its thing, save money, and then have it, grow so that I could retire early, spend more time with my family, my wife, just travel the world, all that fun stuff. And we just decided that there were other avenues to do it. And so that's when I really got into real estate investing. So just at a really high level, within 13 months of deciding to buy our first property, we were able to achieve financial independence through 3 acquisitions and accumulating 26 rental units. Most of that was through house hacking, small multifamily, and then a couple of creatively financed seller finance deals on a multi-unit. The thing that when people hear that, the one thing I always want to clarify is it wasn't 13 months from I decided, that I would do this, I'd learn and all that. This was 13 months from the first acquisition to the last that helped me achieve financial independence. There was 3 years prior to that was dedicated to learning as much as I could. First and foremost about personal finance. Savings is the equation for savings is my favorite, right? It's income minus expenses equals savings. It's very simple conceptually, very hard to apply. But if you ever want to invest money, you have to have some form of savings, and your income has to outpace your expenses. So that's the foundation of everything in
Yeah.
regards to personal finance. So,
And I thank you for clarifying that for the audience, right? Is that, yes, the successes and that duration of time of that, but then explaining that you've had 3 years of time before some of that started, right? So, and that's a huge way to help the audience understand these things may not happen, immediately. It's not like you get started in learning and then instantly can serve up the success. So thank you for clarifying that. Really helpful.
yeah, totally. A lot of people say like, oh yeah, overnight success and all that. And I really like to caveat, yeah, it's kind of a 5-year overnight success, right? It doesn't just happen literally overnight unless you get an inheritance or win the lottery. More often than not, you're not just going to achieve financial independence as soon as you decide to. It takes a lot of learning. And then not only are you learning the actual subject matter itself, but you're constantly pushing through limiting beliefs, mental barriers, mindset issues of, hey, I'm the first person in my family that was born in this country. So like, why should I be able to do something like this? We've never even owned a single property. How can I own a portfolio of real estate? I don't know anyone that makes X amount of income. How am I supposed to do more than that? Or it's really hard to, I think they want people to save 10 to 20% of their investments, or their income and use that as savings. Well, how do I achieve more than that? So there's so many levels of mental barriers that you're constantly overcoming throughout that process. And of that 5 years, really for me, it started in 2018. I started consuming as much information as I could on Bigger Pockets. It's a real estate investing forum, as well as personal finance forums all throughout the internet, just trying to learn as much as possible. And then for me, the most important thing of when it comes to real estate investing is understanding what is and is not a deal. And we call that underwriting, basically taking the information on the property and seeing, does this make sense? Does this have the returns that I'm looking for? And the problem with most people is at a certain point, once we figure out how to do that, we spend so much time constantly doing that. And even when properties hit our investment criteria, or what we call our buy box, it's still really hard to pull the trigger and actually move forward with executing and purchasing that property. And that's another huge limiting belief. We call it paralysis by analysis, where you spend so much time just consuming information, underwriting these deals, but never actually executing on that. So I was in that phase as well for years. I mean, I spent a ton of time underwriting deals that I thought were good, but I was too nervous about talking to an agent, talking to a lender, actually submitting an offer, going to walk the property, all those things. So those are all the things you really want to understand as you're starting your journey. That's so important to understand. There's learning and then taking action, and they have to happen at the same time, basically. So.
Yeah, and I'm loving that you're sharing that, because as we're going to talk in a few minutes here about your strengths in particular, is really understanding kind of that speed, right? You're talking about how quick are you going to take action, right? When you've got all of the information, and then actually doing, right? Start the action part. So we'll talk a bit about that, because there is definitely a little roadmap that we can look at based off of knowing our strengths, knowing there's domains, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But knowing those is a gateway, right? And then even if it is something that might kind of hinder somebody's action, knowing it is a big part of being able to overcome it, right? If you know it and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, I might struggle a little, but I might surround myself with people who can help me get past that, right? So
Definitely. And I think that's a huge part of what helped me overcome a lot of my, let's say, limiting beliefs or constant analysis, was surrounding myself with people who were doing the things that I wanted to do. They were just a few steps ahead. So just understanding, okay, if I never actually make that first offer, buy that first property, I'll never get anywhere. I'll just spend all my time underwriting properties. And that's cool. That's a fun hobby, but that wasn't my goal. My goal wasn't to be the best underwriter ever. It was to have a rental portfolio that would help me achieve financial independence. So I knew I had to start with the first, but the reason I was able to scale so quickly was because once I realized, hey, I can do this, I understand what I'm doing. And after achieving that first one, the floodgates opened up to the concept of, okay, this is real. All this time I've spent focusing and learning on this stuff, or learning about this stuff, like here it is in practice, and here it is working the way it was supposed to. So I think you mentioned floodgates, so that actually really resonated with me as well, because that's what it felt like.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to dig in deep here and spend some time looking at this and seeing how it shows up in your life, right? For those in the audience who don't know, what's a creative engineer? What does that look like? And what does that, kind of the work look like when we talk about you being kind of that creative engineer in real estate investing?
Yeah, definitely. So I was dubbed that in the real estate investing community that I spend my most time with, which is sub 2 with Pace Morby. And really what it means for me, or I believe why they call me that, is because for 2 reasons. As I mentioned, underwriting, I'm an excellent underwriter, but it's not, underwriting is essentially just taking all the information you have, plugging into a calculator, and then making an analysis based on the results of that and deciding, should we buy this? Okay, cool, let's do it. If it doesn't pencil out, is there a way we can restructure it to make it pencil out, restructure the terms of the deal to see if there's a way to make it financially viable, or just deciding, hey, more often than not, it's, hey, this is not a deal. It's time to move on, because a lot of people spend a lot of time looking at properties that just don't make sense. They don't make financial sense. And that's fine. I tell people that 95% of the properties out there are not good real estate investments. Maybe if you have so much money, you need tax depreciation, you're willing to take property at a loss. But most people want to make money when they're investing money into a property. They want to generate passive income that comes with that. So it's really important to understand, what do the numbers look like, so that when you execute, you're pretty much in line with what you anticipated the returns of your property would be. So a creative engineer for me is someone that can accurately assess a problem, gather all of the fixed and variable data, make some educated guesses, and then create a variety of solutions that address some of your originally desired objectives. So that's like a lot, right? It's just a word salad of kind of weird words. But for the most part, for me, it's all about reverse engineering. Yeah. When I'm working with sellers and trying to buy their properties on creative terms, like what is the ideal outcome for both of us? I know for me, as the buyer of a property, I'm always looking to buy great real estate properties in ideal locations. And the goal is for them to make me a solid amount of money each month, a solid amount of profit or cash flow, as we call it. And for the deal to require as little amount of capital upfront to enter the deal and to renovate the property.
Yeah. And how many of these, if you were to take a wild guess, like how many just from your own experience have you done, right? Where you just penciled them out, and again, it's probably like a muscle, right? You're going to be exercising that muscle of underwriting and just continuing to look at the numbers and to make sure it makes sense. How many would you say you've done?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will state, before I was even comfortable buying my first ever property, I already underwrote hundreds of properties before then. So before I even was comfortable buying the first one, it was hundreds of properties. And then at a certain point, I was underwriting every single property in my local market. Just to give a little context, the way I got into real estate investing was utilizing my VA loan to buy a small multifamily unit property, 2 to 4 units, live in one unit and rent the other sides out. I did that. I've done that 3 times in a row, basically 3 years in a row. And when I'm doing that, I'm underwriting every single 2 to 4 unit property in that entire market as they come and hit the market every single time, no matter what, to understand what do the numbers look like on average. And does this deal, is it better or worse than what I can get on average in my local market? So before I ever bought the first one, it was hundreds. Since then, it's been thousands of properties. I do dozens a week. Not only do I do them for myself, I do them for teams that I'm part of. And I also do them as part of I also have the #1 creative finance calculator out there on the market. And I help people underwrite using my calculator. And I'm actually going to restart doing some live Zooms weekly where I'm just constantly helping people underwrite their deals and see, is this a deal? Can we restructure this to make it a deal? Or, hey, you got to move on. This is wasting your time and the seller's time as well, because this doesn't make sense for either of your goals right now.
Yeah, love it. And congratulations. That's great to create something that can be used for the many, right? It sounds like a very worthy tool to use and to be able to perfect. And just like you would if you're going to the gym, right? It's those reps. It's how many times are you going to do it until you become stronger, right? I imagine that's just kind of how, like anything of life, right? We got to do it several times, and probably most of the learning is done when you're doing it over and over again.
Totally. And there's a huge learning curve to it too, right? The first dozens of times, 100 times you do it, it's going to be slower than when you do it subsequent times. And you're not going to feel as confident in your numbers, because at the end of the day, you're plugging numbers based on, there's some fixed data, but most of it is your best educated guess on what the property's worth, what the rent will be, what your expenses will be, all that stuff. The more experience you have going through that and the more real live examples you have, whether it's your properties or others, this was something that made me really comfortable too, is underwriting people's deals, other investors' deals, after they decided to purchase it, even if it wasn't going to do me any good, except for the fact that it was helping me build, like, understand better. Okay, so they bought that deal. Let me see why they bought that deal. What were the results of it, and how closely did that align with their investment decision? Like, that's the best way to learn in my experience. Instead of working on hypothetical properties, I no longer help people underwrite things hypothetically. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Just find me a real property and a real motivated seller, and then let's underwrite real deals, or let's review deals that people have closed on and see, okay, what were the returns they were looking for, and why did they decide to proceed with that property? That is the best way to learn. And there's a huge learning curve when you're starting to, as you're going up. Like you said, it's just building a muscle at the gym. You're extremely sore after the first few weeks you go back to the gym after January 1st. But by the time it's February, March, May, if you've consistently done it, you're not going to be as sore. You're going to see the growth, and you're going to feel much more confident every time you go in.
I love it. I love it. You're talking my language, especially on the health side as well. Like I've transformed. And when you can see transformation, right? When you see whether it's your body, whether it's your mind and your abilities, the skills that you bring, like you're just able to see that growth. It's visual. And even something like this, would you agree that you actually have some feelings and know that that growth has happened?
For sure. I would say first and foremost, mentally, you start feeling more and more confident each and every time. But also, this ties back into the gym analogy, we'll say. I always tell people the biggest problem with communities like ours, which are really successful, where you're surrounded by so many successful real estate investors, is there's too many ways to make a lot of money in real estate investing. The idea is to focus on one thing at a time, develop that skill set, get really, really solid at it, and then move on to the next one. Just like when you're going to the gym, you're not going to try to work out your whole body day one, or I guess you could if you do lightweight, but you're really not going to try to overwhelm yourself and do Pilates, weightlifting, swimming. Now you're doing saunas regularly. Like you can't do everything all at once. It's best to get really, really good. For me, it was house hacking multifamily properties, 2 to 4 units in my local market, every single one that was on market. And then it was, okay, how am I going to find more of these multifamily properties, but start reaching out to sellers directly before they list them on the market? And then it was, okay, how do I structure these deals to do something called wholesaling, which is basically structuring a deal with the seller directly. And then instead of me purchasing the deal, selling that contract to someone else. And then it was really focusing on seller financing and creative financing. And then it was joining Sub 2 and then really expanding on Subject 2 and other types of creative finance strategies. But I couldn't have gotten to Subject 2 without doing all of the work and all of the building my skill sets before. Like you don't go straight to the 50 plus dumbbells. You start somewhere, get your reps in, build up your strength, and then continually build on that. That's really the main concept that I want to articulate is if you try to go 0 to 100, it's just too hard. So the people that go to the gym and go crazy hard the first few days of the year, they're more than likely the ones to burn out because they're going off of some momentum or some motivation, but you really need to build that skill set of consistency and understanding it's going to be a lifelong journey. Real estate investing, like anything else, is not designed to be perfected in a short amount of time. It's to be treated similarly to like the education that we spent 20 plus years to get any career that you're in. You don't go to so my analogies are typically more education focused because of the engineering background, as opposed to health and wellness. But this ties in well too. You don't go and do college level physics without doing that elementary math and then building on elementary sciences and then middle school and then high school and then building to the college level, college level courses. You have to start somewhere, build on that, and continually progress. That's the overall goal, and understand the timelines of these things. You're not going to get rich over in one day. That's the best and worst part about this, because it filters other people out.
Yeah, I love that, because it really is a journey, and you're not going to go from A to Z in a very short period of time. It's going to be a gradual progression, and yeah, those are some really great points made. I love it. I think it's really an understanding of that, and then never giving up, right? Being consistent and persistent, and just keep at it, even though it might feel slow at times, that you feel like, am I going anywhere? Right.
And this might come up in my strengths, as you imagine. You asked me a question, I did not answer it. Real quickly, what is a creative engineer for the audience? In my opinion, a creative engineer is someone who is very, very specialized in underwriting properties and then being able to restructure them sometimes, and understanding the various ways you can acquire a property and the various ways you can manage the property. I would say that's one of the biggest things that makes you a creative deal engineer, is taking all the data that you have, plugging it into whatever calculator you're using, and understanding the results of that. And then being able to understand, okay, it may not work through this one method of acquisition or this method of management, but what if we change these terms with the seller so we can acquire it differently? Or what if we rent it out by the room instead of just the whole house as a long-term rental? It's really the ability to look at it and not through one perspective and say, oh, it doesn't pencil out this one way. It's to look at what are the other avenues this property can make sense. And then, in my opinion, something that I also add to the creative engineering space is really being able to then utilize that information and say, hey, seller, we do want to work with you on this deal, but it doesn't work for us at these terms. Let's see if we can restructure it so we get what we want. And as I mentioned, right, I want good properties in good locations that make us money and don't cost a ton of money to get into. And we have a good ratio for that, which is cash on cash return. But then also more importantly is understanding, what does the seller specifically want? What are the seller's needs? What are they willing to trade their property for that they like less for something that they want more? That's always the goal for me, is they want their property less than something else they want more. What is that thing they want more? How do I help them achieve that so that I can get the thing that they want less, or the property they're willing to sell? And that's kind of the mindset that I take on it, is underwriting, but then also being able to restructure and renegotiate these deals, or the terms of the deal, to see if it makes sense still for the seller and us, because we both have to agree at the end of the day if we're going to proceed together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we're probably, as we start to dive into your strengths, being able to kind of, some of the things that you're sharing, right? That's how this becomes really powerful, because you start to see the correlation between, this is how I do things, I reverse engineer things. These are the kinds of behaviors and things that we see that show up, right, in our lives. And as we start to understand ourselves, right, and understand what does that look like for me as an individual, right? Because there is 1 in 33 million chances that you would have the same exact strengths as someone else.
Wow.
And in order for that to happen, you won't show up the same, right? You'll never show up. Even if you had the same exact strengths, you will never show up exactly the same. So they will all appear differently. And every one of the strengths that we'll talk about, there's 34 themes. They're all on a pendulum, right? In that it can serve you very well, and it's a thriving, great place, or it can be on the other end of the spectrum and be what we call in your blind spot, right? And it's not serving you well. And you may not even notice it. That's why we call it the blind spot, right? You just don't even notice it. And then I think with time, as you understand how these are playing out in your life, it becomes a little bit more clear, where you're like, oh, yeah, that doesn't work so well. Like, I noticed this is what happens, and it's in my blind spot. I didn't even notice this, but that becomes more and more apparent. And it takes time to sometimes see those things. That's why having a coach, right? When you invest in having somebody who's coaching you through that, can get through those so much faster, right? Than if you did it by yourself, because you're just, trying to figure, how are these working well for me? And I'm using them to the highest capacity, right? Because the ones that sit up at the top, those are the ones we want to invest in. The ones down on the bottom, the ability to move them up or to strengthen them will not be as impactful as when we do pay a very close attention and focus on the ones that are up on the top. And we'll talk more about that. But
yeah, I'm really excited really genuinely super excited to read through these, because we'll probably see this in my strengths, but this type of self-reflection is not my biggest strength. Probably it might be shown here. I don't know. We'll see what it looks like. But something we commonly say in sub 2 as well, which I take, it's not really my inherent mentality to think like this, but I take it so much to heart, is that your real estate portfolio will never outpace your personal development. You cannot achieve what you want financially and be as successful as you want in all aspects of life, not just financially, but with your family, with your lifestyle, with your health, everything, unless you're consistently focusing the same amount of time and energy on your personal development. And the cheat code, as you mentioned, is to leverage other people who are specialists in this. So I'm really excited to hear your perspective on my strengths, and then how I can further leverage what I'm already good at, or some of my top strengths, and then understand, what do I need to hire out, or what do I need to bring into my team that can really help me take things to the next level, because it is either in my blind spot, or it's just not one of my strengths. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, well, I'm eager to do that as well. And I want to touch on one other thing before we start diving into that. And you mentioned the word team, and teams are dynamic, right? And so as you build, right, and as teams grow, it's knowing who on the team and whose strengths, right, are we seeing? And so when you see those and you start to understand each other, one, it gives you a common language. You can probably bypass some challenging issues that flare up if you don't know how to talk about it, right? Like if you know something about yourself and you can share with everybody, like, hey, I know sometimes I'm, tend to kind of run with it, and I'm not trying to, leave you behind. I know I'm kind of moving fast. Tell me when you need me to explain more, right? Like those are the types of examples of where you can tell somebody, like in a high activator, for example, which sits pretty high up for your strengths, right? Is that as an activator, others might actually feel like they can't keep up, right? They're not able to meet your needs, and that could lose some people, right? That could be coming along with you, that have some really good, powerful, support that they could be providing and being part of that team. So I love it. And teams are so much fun for me. I really enjoy actually spending time with teams because it's powerful to see everybody kind of go on that journey together and understand, like, wow, okay, this is me, this is how I sit on this team, and this is what I bring. And then you kind of know each other to the place where you're, like you're saying, this is something that you can leverage someone else to help you do certain things because that is strong for them, and it may not be for you, right?
And that's another great point that I do want to highlight is that, and I think we've all heard this saying, but you can go faster on your own, but you can go further together. And that truly is kind of the season in my life, in my investing journey, in my, I guess, personal development that I'm really trying to focus on right now more than anything else, because of the fact that I've always been the individual doer and I got burnt out. It was too much. It was no longer having fun. And so I started partnering with others again. But now it's okay. It's not just partnering with others, but how do we make the most of our synergies or symbiotic relationship? Like, how do we make things work best for all of us? And I think you mentioning the activator is already a little light bulb in my head. And in regards to feedback that I've received sometimes, where I'm constantly moving on to the next thing or working towards something else or just starting to work, where a lot of the times it'd be more fruitful to focus more on the communication and making sure those around me are all on the same page so that we can go further together rather than going faster individually on my own, even in the confines of a team. So
yeah, and that's why this is really powerful stuff, right? Because you start to reflect and realize, okay, here's opportunities, right? Here are places that I can definitely make adjustments and be aware of, right? It's all about awareness, and then being able to navigate, right? Knowing those things, and then being able to really leverage it, and it's powerful. So you said something right now that just definitely resonated with your very first strength achiever. And so why don't we just start diving in? It's up to you. We can either put it up on my screen where I'll share it, just kind of the report itself, so we can look at it and talk about it. And what
that's
I'd
fine.
do.
I'm very transparent about everything. I think it's the most valuable for myself and for others as well. So feel
And
free
I
to
love
share it all. Yeah,
it.
I
Okay.
don't, someone judges me on my strengths so well.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I love it because now you've got it timestamped. You could use this if there's somebody who ever you want to say, hey, here's a little bit about me. We can actually get something here we don't have to repeat. So I'm going to share my screen and then be able to get us looking a little bit at those and help to kind of define it, kind of help make it. Here we go. So for those that are watching, I'm going to just slide it up just a tad bit because the full 34 report will say your name and the date that you took it. So Michael took this back in February 23rd of 2023 of this year. And what you'll notice up towards the top here is this DNA strand. And they correlate with, of course, the top 10, which sit up, the very top. Those just come natural, right? These are things that you're not trying very hard. It's just your superpowers, right? And you probably see these things pretty easily. I heard you say a couple of things, that really resonate. that you don't wait on things, right? You kind of like to just start taking some action, and that achiever, which is your number one, right? Definitely could be one of those areas that, is why that is how you kind of move and take action quickly. And so when we look at these, I was sharing that, of course, there's the DNA strand that sits up on the top, but the theme that's dominant for you within the color coordination to help you understand is that the influencing theme is dominant. And that orange theme here is essentially you taking action, right? Taking charge, speaking up, and making sure others are being heard. And that influencing theme definitely is that, go take action. And that is loud and clear, even when we're looking at your results. One of the things that I also want to highlight is on page 21. So we're just going to take a real quick look at this, because the way we read this, and this report has a lot of information, but what it does not dive into very deeply is this bar chart right here. And so influencing how you read it is from left to right. And the level of intensity is going to be, you're going to see the range could be short, could be long. But as we can see, influencing has got a very, pretty large dominant, component of your bar chart here, along with strategic thinking. And strategic thinking are the folks who are really analyzing data and information, which is also several things that I heard from you as you were just describing yourself and some of your successes, and executing, which is that going and taking action, last with the relationship building. So this is like a really quick way to see, okay, what is this saying about me, and how I see some of these strengths play out. So I could hear it when you were talking about some of these things. It definitely came out loud and clear. Some of these things, but we're going to dive into asking a couple of questions, talk a little bit about, where, you've had a chance to look over these results, right? And do you have any questions about, because they all have pretty decent descriptive single word, but they are a theme, meaning that there'll be a little bit more than just a single word to describe what this is. So for example, right, number 3, learner. Learner, for example, it's kind of dual in that there's this component of enjoying to learn, not necessarily that you're going to take action with it. It's just joy of learning. But then there's this continuous improvement, right? So that ability to go, oh, I did it, but I'm going to make it better. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, definitely. I think very much like that. It's not just doing it once, but how can I continue iterating whatever that was, the process that I did? How can we make it a little bit more efficient or a little more successful or something along those lines? Right. Sometimes though, I think through it and then just move on to the next thing though. It's like, all right, I gotta focus. There's more stuff to get done. So it's kind of a battle of thinking through that way and then just like, hey, I gotta just get stuff done. I gotta move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of the strengths. So by the way, we'll look at the bottom as well, because it's good to know. We need to know that, right? But at the top, all of our strengths, what I should describe is that it's kind of a pendulum. And on one side, you could actually have what we call a blind spot. You just don't even recognize that it's coming in so loud and so clear that it may actually be detrimental in some ways, versus the success that it can give when it's shining in all its glory and it's, being channeled very well. But there are those occasions that it's in a blind spot and you don't recognize it, or, even see that, oh gosh, yeah, like it could show up in a variety of ways, right? So your number 1 is achiever. And what I'll do is I'll do a real quick recap of your top 5.
Awesome.
Which will be kind of helpful, right? Because these are the ones, like I say, these are natural. You don't even recognize or see them. But the achiever is certainly focused on accomplishments, right? It's the do you and let me ask you this, Michael, I'd be really curious. Achievers sometimes enjoy writing like the to-do list, right?
Mhm.
Might actually say, okay, these are the things I will accomplish today, and actually maybe even find a bit of joy to like scratch things off and say I've accomplished it. But there's that sense of gratification when there is achievements happening throughout, and that just comes kind of naturally. Does that sound familiar? Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, definitely. I have like checklists everywhere. I have like physical, I have like a Word doc, and then I have like my Mac notes that connects to my phone of like lists of things I need to get done. Recently though, something that I do a lot of is write kind of everything down and like try to get everything done. And right now I'm trying to face not just doing everything that I think I need to do, but like what actually is important for me to do first, because I'm running out of time now to like get the things done that I want, and I keep pushing things back on the list. So it's like that's a big thing I'm trying to focus on, not just getting things done because they're on the list, but like why is that as high as it is on my list is kind of a thing I'm facing at this level right now.
That's great, right? Because you're aware that there's so many things, and we were talking about this offline, was that you're just sometimes you feel called to just get it done, and when you get it done versus, well, maybe I should delegate, right? Free up your time a little. Like what are money making tasks for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are those things on that list that would help you, right? In
Needle
whatever.
movers.
Exactly.
That's what
Versus like the busy work, right? Like, is there
the
busy work
mundane
that,
tasks. Yeah. And
yeah,
that's kind of where I mean, I was listening to an Alex Hermosi podcast earlier today about it starts becoming like, how did he phrase it? It it's there's a lot of value to stop looking at things in regards to that can get done within hours, even days, but start looking at things that can get done over longer time periods of things that won't just be accomplished because it's on your task list, but it's like this big goal that you want to accomplish. And then obviously we know to reverse engineer it, but like like that's not like a task list kind of thing. It's so much more than that when you're starting to think of these bigger long-term projects. Yeah, there's tasks to get there, but you have to like keep that big goal in mind. So that's something I'm trying to deal with right now as well, is how do I start thinking less task focused, more big goal focused?
mm-hmm,
Because I'm very
right,
much a task person.
yeah, and the tasks that are going to move the needle,
Mm-hmm.
right? Prioritize, perhaps, right? It
Mm-hmm.
could be an A, B, or C action item, right? If you've got a whole list, then it's an opportunity to look at it and say, okay, is this really the highest priority A item, or can it be held and be more of a C level, right?
Definitely.
Versus urgent, and go, take care of that first, because it could generate, if it generates, um, success or money or whatever that is, right? That's what you want to, do more of that, right? Versus the busy tasks, right? The
Definitely.
busy work.
I'd love to hear more about futuristic. That one's a little, a little
Yeah,
out
you're
there.
curious. That's good. Yeah. So futuristic, there is this energy about, the individual feeling what that future looks like, right? And being able to take people along with you as you start to see this. And perhaps you tell me, because I heard you share that your wife was alongside with you, um, as you were going through your journey, right? And kind of
Mhm.
leveling up. I heard, you had a smaller, you started a little bit smaller, you went a little bit bigger, as you were going through that process. Do you feel there's someone that has been there with you who you've kind of helped paint that picture of what that future looks like?
It's kind of hard. I've always been very understanding of delayed gratification, at least when it comes to like personal finance. So I've been able to articulate it from that perspective of, it sucks investing your money and not using it right away. Like it sucks. Like tangibly, it's not as fun, but there's
Mhm.
a long-term benefit of that, allowing compounding to do what it does, right? to let it execute. So in that capacity, yes, I think a part of it where I need to get a little more creative is kind of what's really the end goal of all this, like really envisioning what is the point of all this from a financial perspective, like why do we need to get to the level that we want to get to? And that's where I'm trying to get better at, because for me, monetary or quantitative goals have been much easier to accomplish because that's an easy KPI. Oh, I want this net worth, I want this much monthly cash flow, I want this many houses. I can track that very easily. But the real why, and a big part of financial independence for me is to have the time freedom, to be able to do what I want when I want without having to worry about the financial repercussions. But it's like, what exactly is that what I want when I want sometimes? Because I know I'll always have some work involved. But yeah, from the futuristic perspective, it's been easy to articulate from a financial perspective, not so much from like the big why are we doing all this outside of, yeah, it's gonna be nice to have a nice nest egg, I guess.
Yeah. And sometimes it shows up in different ways, right? And perhaps now that you're aware that, okay, well, you're thinking about the future, right? And whether you share that with others or it's just in your own head, right? Because that could also be the case. You may not be communicating that with anyone else, but if you yourself get excited about the future, right? Knowing like, oh my goodness, we are headed to, the goals that we're working towards. So it'll show up differently, but I will tell you, there is, in my own experience, that, and for those watching, I first did my very first assessment 10 years ago. And then I recently did it again. But one of the things that is is futuristic. And futuristic, although it's not in my top 10, it's like 11, I think. I get really excited when I'm like working on a project or working on something. And maybe today it doesn't look the way it should, but I am so excited about what it will be in the future. And just the excitement of, okay, this is what it will look like. It doesn't look like that today, but it will look like that. So that's where I see futuristic. There's a lot of energy in me when I get to that like opportunity, right? And I mention energy because energy that it takes for you to demonstrate these things up on the top, it doesn't require much because you're excited, right? It's fulfilling. It makes you feel joy. And as we look at the bottom, when we get the chance here, after we at least get through the top 5, we'll talk a little bit about those because that's where my curiosity kind of spikes. Learners, by the way, are very curious. They ask a lot of questions. Does that sound like anything? Like, do you tend to ask questions?
Yeah, 100%, definitely. Like, I'm not one to just hear someone say something and then accept it on face value. I have to have a lot of explanation to be able to rationalize it for myself as well. So I'd rather learn not what they're saying, but like why what they're saying is true, or why they believe that it's true, so that I can be able to build my own case for things. But I do love learning a lot. Like, it's like a big thing. It's not necessarily in the traditional sense. I mean, school was fine, but like really, I just love learning about things that I want to learn about. And I'm constantly looking whether it's watching podcasts or YouTube or whatever, whatever it is, to learn books and applying concepts. I mean, that's my favorite way to learn now, is just learning just enough to be able to apply something and then iterating from there to make things better. That's a big one right now that I'm enjoying. So
yeah, nice. Well, the activator in you, which is number 4, is that go and do, right? It's less about meeting, right? If you have to have a meeting and you have to talk through all of it, you want to forego the meeting. You're like, when are we going to get this stuff done? I don't want to sit here and talk about it. I want to go do it.
To a fault too, for sure. So that's where,
where would you say you see that?
Yeah, from an employee perspective. I mean, and I say employee, I've been a leader in almost every single capacity that I've been. paid. I've always, whether it's the military, whether it was even while I was getting my undergraduate, whether it's now currently I oversee over 80 people. And so I've always had a leader role, but to a fault, sometimes it's just like, hey, let's get some of the stuff done and not have so many meetings about things. Fortunately, your employment kind of forces meetings a lot more than I would personally like, or, but nonetheless, it is helpful to, especially for longer term projects, to go through that process. But for sure, my activator side kicks in and says, hey, can you imagine all the stuff we could have got done in the last hour or whatever? Like, do we need to talk for this long about it? But,
Yeah.
So I see both sides of it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the questions that I failed to ask, because I really think that a session that you and I have, or that the viewers get to watch, it's more about what this discussion brings you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody gets to go along in this journey with you, which is wonderful, right? But as we have this conversation, what's going to be really important for you to get out of our discussion today? Have you given that any thought? Like, what would make this conversation feel like a success?
Yeah, so this one is, well, it's good that we're breaking these down more, because I know they do a good job breaking it down on the following pages, but it's really good to hear it from a different perspective as well. Kind of understanding what these mean, so then I can get a better insight as to how I feel like it's relevant. But a big one is just understanding what are the, I guess we can't really go into all that today, but really understanding what are some of the strengths I should be doubling down on, and then, like you discussed, what are the blind spots associated with some of these strengths that I should be cognizant of, because I do understand, there's a fault to me being the one to just want to get things done all the time without planning as much as I could. Or maybe it's not the highest and best use of my time to be the one to do all these things. It's better to delegate. But it looks like some of my strengths push me toward just getting tasks done, or that's just the way that I am. And then also understanding what are some of my bigger weaknesses, and how can I either leverage others or improve on them as necessary.
Yeah. And we definitely can do that. And we can do that relatively quick. So by all means, I think we definitely could get those addressed.
Awesome.
So yeah. So number 5, really quick, because I heard you say it even right now, was your high. You also, your number 5 is command, right? Which I hear it in your voice, right? In the way you articulate. But it's being able, of course, to get others to come along with you, right? To do whatever it is that needs to, whether it's, in the workplace getting done, whether it's a family gathering and probably trying to herd the family to, say, get out the door on a certain time because there's a dinner reservation or whatever, right? But being able to command and get everybody moving. But what I'd like to do is really quickly talk about those top 5 and kind of the potential blind spots, right? Or the things you may run into, and we'll see if these resonate at all. So we talked about that high achiever, right? And that high achiever, what can happen is that to-do list gets so big, and you're just constantly doing, and maybe not delegating. What can happen for an achiever is this kind of burnout that just kind of happens because there's so much that the individual may actually feel that they need to get done. Although you have high stamina, which is what we know of the high achievers, but at some point you're human, and you can't do it and sustain it forever.
For sure. I have burnout, especially when I feel like certain days at the end of the day when it's like, dang, I was working all day, but I don't know if I got anything that I really wanted to get done. That really is demotivating. It's not just like burnout from working a lot consecutively, but it's also like, I'm working a lot, but what the hell am I working for? Or like, what's the big reason? Or like, what's the goal?
What's the why, maybe?
Yeah. Why did I work so hard if I don't feel like I actually, like, I just got all these random little tasks done? It's exhausting. Like, that's mentally as well as physically exhausting.
Sure.
especially when I reflect back at the, at the end of the day.
Yeah. And any particular examples that you can think of where and it sounds almost even like a mindset challenge, right? Because you're thinking, what am I doing? Why is this not producing something? Or is that, how would you describe that? How would you
Well,
describe
like right now in particular, like the biggest benefits I add to my businesses is finding more properties, underwriting them, and raising the capital to close on them. But then I'm spending a lot of time with things that I don't really enjoy, which are like finances and bookkeeping. And I'm looking for a bookkeeper right now, but like doing those types of tasks are exhausting to me.
Mhm.
Organizing some old folders and for our properties, or making sure all the closing documents are together, or like those kinds of things, especially being on the phone waiting for an insurance company, or American Express, having to be on the phone with them for an hour, and things like that are just like, oh my gosh, this sucks. Like it needs to get done, but like, or like setting up utilities or tenant screening sometimes, like, oh, those are things that I don't enjoy so much anymore. And it's like, I know I can find someone to do it. Well, I know I should find someone to do it. I guess I don't know how to find someone to help take on those types of tasks, because the highest and best use of my time is not sitting on the phone waiting at American Express or setting up utilities for a property. It's so much more about like finding more great deals, underwriting them, raising the capital, and closing on them.
Yeah. Is it time to start looking at a team, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have teams in the sense of wholesale teams and things like that, but really building this out from a really successful hobby, we'll say, to an actual business is kind of this next step, because my achiever has gotten me this far, but my achiever, I don't think, or maybe activate, I don't know, whatever strength it is, has gotten me this far of being the doer. But it is exhausting. It's definitely exhausting, and it's not as enjoying when you can pretty much achieve your way through like a decent amount of volume. But once you hit a certain point, you just can't, there's no more you can give that isn't just routine maintenance. I need to figure out ways to keep doing the things that help me grow in the first place, but not the things that are just helping me maintain per se. So
Right, right. The level up, right?
yeah,
The chance to level up and then push down the things that are no longer, going to serve you, right?
yeah,
To get you to the next level. And when you get to the next level, you're going to perhaps need a team or need
mhm,
others, right? And collaborating with others, which makes a little bit of sense because down at the end, that for that bar that we looked at, right? Down on the end was the relationship building, right?
mhm,
And perhaps that's where some opportunity can lay with, expanding your ability to, have the people, right? Have those relationships, have the right folks to see if they should be part of the team that helps you, right? And once
mhm.
they take on those certain tasks or those things, um, that may free you, right? You're going to be free of that and be able to focus on those acquisitions and do all the things um, that
Yeah.
can grow, right?
Ken
You could
Ken
grow.
Clothier says, going from a hustler to a CEO. So that's basically that's basically what I'm looking to do. Turn it into a business that I can work on, not constantly in. So
In exactly. And so let's look at number 34, right? The bottom. And this might help a bit as well. So individualization, and I'll read this description just and see what you think of it. But it says people exceptionally talented in the individualization theme are intrigued with the unique qualities of each person. They have a gift for figuring out how different people can work together productively.
not my strength.
Mhm.
um, Usually it's, I mean, I ask people a lot of what they think their strengths are and where they feel like they can add the most value. That's the closest I get really to understanding uh how people can work well together. It's based on what they believe of themselves, or things I've seen, but it's not for me. A lot of the times, I'm more focused on the collective or the overall goal, not so much each individual component of it. And I know that's a fault, but that's just kind of where my brain is focused more on getting the overall goal done and hoping the pieces fit them figure themselves out, as opposed to finding the best pieces to put them in the right spots. And from a W-2 or as an employee perspective, a lot of the time that's already done. So it's not like it's something that you're inherently trained on. to do. It's not
Oh,
like we already have HR and we have people underneath me who know what inspectors or what strengths will fit well in what roles. For me, it's like it's always been, let's get this big vision and then turn it into goals and then be able to execute that through 3 to 5 smaller goals that get us there, not necessarily making sure every single piece is in the right role to get that. So, I would say that's definitely something I could work on. I just haven't had a lot of experience in it.
well, and the ones that are on the bottom, right? So like your last 4 or 5, right? I think looking at them and saying, okay, what do they mean, right? And it's a sense of awareness. And I can give a very good example if you're okay with that, that I saw in myself recently.
Yeah.
That, when you're in a social environment and people are mingling and talking, I will get very focused on a single person, right? And lose track of kind of like who else should I be including into this conversation, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so that includer was for mine is a lot lower. And so recently I was celebrating my husband's birthday, and I realized somebody to my right who I was fully engaged with 2 other people to my left, but this person on the right was not included, right? And so in that moment, again, it's not my strength. And I found myself very focused on these other 2, but I recognized it. And in that moment, I literally stopped. I was like, give me just a second. I'm like looped in this other person so that they could be part and included in the conversation. And so, even knowing these things about yourself can alter the way that you show up if you're aware of it. Doesn't mean that you're a bad person. By all means,
Mhm.
it doesn't, but it just means that it doesn't come natural to you. And there's the energy is very different when you're, paying attention to the ones that sit down on the bottom. They're not going to come natural.
And
And
part of
that's
it for me is because I am so goal oriented and task oriented. It Weird as this is, it's like too slow, the results. As someone who understands delayed
Mhm.
gratification, the results of some of those bottom ones are a lot slower. They probably will push everything further if I dedicated more time to it, but the tangible results are much slower for me. So it's like let's just focus on the tasks. Hopefully everyone fills into the right roles as opposed to taking that extra time to understand everyone in depthly and then put them in the right spots. It's more of the task that I'm focused on, the goal, as opposed to the individual, which I know that's definitely very visibly on this list.
Yeah. Well, and knowing the ones on the top. So for example, an activator, right? Which I hear very, very dominant and where, when you're speaking about what you're doing um and that activator, when you're working with others, another powerful tool is to know who to work with, right?
Mhm.
So if you're an activator, best people to work with is those that are high focus, high strategic, also high activator. Um,
Get
and
stuff
there's
done.
another one. Yeah. And so those are the people that can help you as well, right? As the activator, um, the blind spot to the activator is that you could possibly be going so fast that the people that you are trying to work with get lost,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, that's definitely something. I think my business partner and I are both probably very similar in strengths. And part of it is not only other people getting lost, but sometimes we get lost in, hey, our goal was to buy $10 more million of real estate. But then it's like, wait, now we have to figure out the operational piece as well as it is finding the great deals, underwriting them, buying them, raising the cap. But like now there's a lot of operational things
Yeah.
needs them to get met because we didn't necessarily think of those in advance. We were just focused on this goal and we were executing so quickly. It's scaling is actually fairly easy for us, our partnership, but it's then building out the right systems to accommodate and streamline that scaling is definitely kind of something we're dealing with. So now we're kind of slowing it down so we can go back and build out the systems. But I think me and him share a lot of these strengths where you mentioned 2 activators just moving forward so quickly that's like, oh, wait, shoot, we forgot about a couple things in the, in the rear view.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And recognizing that, right? Going, okay, wait,
Mhm.
wait. We gotta put some systems in place here so that we can, now that a system is there, then the next time it's going to be faster. And that learner in you might, that might resonate, right? Be able to say, okay, yeah, we're going to process improve this. This is going to get better.
When I'm forcing myself right now to, okay, I need to find a bookkeeper because it's not scalable for me to be a bookkeeper for 40 plus rental property. It's just not. It's not the highest and best use of my time.
Yep.
It's not the highest and best use of my time to even be an operations manager. So looking at fractional COOs and even fractional CFOs to help fill in the gaps that are necessities for scaling, but that are not the highest and best use of my time or my strengths. It's not even my time. Someone needs to do it, right? But it's not the highest and best use of my personal strengths or my partner's strengths.
Yeah. And your time, right? Like
Mhm.
like you're saying, I
Yeah,
mean,
my time.
data
And
entry.
I don't enjoy it, like I just genuinely don't like it. It's boring. It's not as fun as having another great property or doing a really nice like improving a property or raising a ton of capital in a short amount of time. Like those are fun for me. That's like stressful, but it's a challenge that I enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Well, with what we've talked about, do you feel that you're kind of grasping a little bit more about what you see in yourself?
I think a lot more than when I first got the report and read through it, for sure. It's I think just as important as understanding the strengths is understanding the blind spots of these strengths.
Mhm.
So then I can, like I said, like thinking about this stuff more, it really highlights, hey, I just can't. My instinct is just to do everything, write everything down and do it all, but that's not the best thing to do. Understanding that that is the biggest weakness or biggest blind spot of the type of strengths that I have, or for the strengths that I have, is really important. Otherwise, I'll just continue doing it until I burn out and then go through that cycle again and again, as opposed to, okay, wait, how do we now leverage this knowledge to then continue growing and scaling, which in my instance is actually not doing, but instead taking that time to understand individuals, putting them in the right spots, and scaling the right way, rather than just trying to do it. Yeah.
And maybe your partner, right? Look at your
Mhm.
partner. If your partner does this and maybe their individualization or maybe their ability to leverage other people, maybe there's a little bit more relationship building there that,
Mhm.
they're able to bring in and, get those right people that help support your business, right? The
Yeah, he
finding the
definitely is. So we say he's more relational, I'm more transactional, like in just our thought process. And same with my wife too, actually. The people that I do surround myself are much more, I guess now in hindsight, thinking about them, is they're much more relationship based people than I am, which is great because you need both. It's just, I know where my strengths lie. Fortunately, I've been lucky to surround myself around people that are much more relationship based, because some of my best relationships have come through my relationship based partners, right?
yeah,
So they've brought that value into my life without me having to necessarily excel with that skill set.
absolutely. Sometimes it's the not the how, but the who, right?
Mhm.
Who can help you move the accounting work and bookkeeping stuff off your plate, right? Who can help you, you know, take on some of the tasks of, that would be times you could be using that time more effectively, right? To
Mhm.
grow and expand the business. So I'm hoping that this is, valuable, that you're finding that
Definitely.
this is, you know, some action items. So that's one thing I always like to do is for us to at least come up with one actionable item. More than one, I would say no more than three, but at least one. And I'm going to stop sharing because I want to see you. At this point, I can't see you when I'm sharing my screen. Um, but I want to see, what are your thoughts? Because we've covered quite a bit. I mean, even going through the top five, will definitely give you an idea of, a bit more of that narrative,
Some of my
right?
cool
That
books up
defines
there.
I love it. But is there anything for you right now in your business with what we've talked about that you want to implement, knowing now what you do about who you are and the strengths that you bring?
I mean, the big one is with my weaknesses in particular, it's finding those people that can help, uh, not complement, who can help, not replace, um, help support my weaknesses. I guess they can provide that value that maybe it is more exhausting or energy consuming for me to do. But then also, it just gives me the confirmation that I really just need to really double down on my strengths, because that is the highest and best use of my time. But then also be very cognizant of my weaknesses or my blind spots with those strengths when I'm adding 10 different things to my to-do list, or when I'm just doing this task, really think about what is the best way for me to proceed with that. Really it's back to is that the highest and best use of my time? So that's,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
I just
So
realized how long my name is. It's covering my chin.
so what I heard from you was there is tasks that can come off, that it's more of a who, right? Who can
Mhm.
you add to help you get that work taken off of your plate, um, which is maybe providing a little bit of relief, right? And allowing you to do the things that you find fun. Like I definitely heard loud and clear, bookkeeping is not your favorite thing to do. Um, so what I usually like to do is say, okay, by the next time we have a conversation or a chat or what have you, it'd be like, okay, Michael, did you get that person? Where are you with that? Right. Because there's that accountability component of I need to do these things in order to progress and get leveled up. Right.
Mhm.
Um, anything else that you've taken away from today's conversation that you could see implementing that would benefit your business?
I think that's what I can think of at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Any
Yeah.
any takeaways from, I'd love to hear from your perspective as well, like anything you think that would be good takeaways as well.
And this is where I love the coaching relationship, because it's more about your journey, right? Of where, and mind you, I never like to pressure somebody to be like, I gotta have these certain things, but definitely the coach is my role is to ask questions, because I will not have all the answers,
Mhm.
right? That you ultimately need for where you want to go. But I can ask the right questions, right? The coach is always there to start the development of ideas and the thoughts that help you move towards your goals. Um, and so whatever those goals are, and maybe that's something to write down, right? Because you mentioned it, actually. You mentioned the why is kind of, maybe it's an opportunity to reflect
Mhm.
on your why.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. That's a good point. That's that's definitely a good point. That's
Because
something I've been dealing with a lot. That's something I've been thinking about a lot, is I keep moving the goalposts from a quantitative perspective, because that's an easy thing to do, but the why behind it is still fairly loose.
Mhm. And be able to feel like you could touch whatever the why is, right? Like, can you mentally see that? Can you touch it? Can you grasp what that is? And you're not alone. You're not alone at all with that. I have had other conversations of recent, and they've kind of come to that very similar conclusion, is I've kind of lost my why. Like, I was doing this and now it's kind of a don't know. So, and that's quite all right. We'd have to take that time, which I know is kind of tough, especially for the
Mhm.
influencer. They just want to keep moving versus having a little bit of quiet time to kind of think about that why.
Definitely. Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. This is what energizes me. I love being able to walk through, what's beautiful about you, right? What do you bring that is unique, and there is no one like you. So this is where I find joy. This is fun.
Yeah, what's your stat about the one in however many people have the same strengths?
Yes. So there is 1 in 33 million that would even match your top 5. Isn't that insane? Like
That's crazy.
33 million. So it's like DNA. It's that complete unique, who you are. And even if you found that match, you're not going to show up the same. You would be
Mhm.
totally different.
That's crazy. It really is
Yeah.
your DNA.
Well, I thank you. Is there any questions or anything that
No,
you wanted? Well, I hope you've had a great time, that this has been beneficial for you.
definitely.
And yeah, I mean, if somebody wanted to partner with you, or they're watching this in the future, how could they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so now that we've kind of talked about my strengths and weaknesses, let's exclude all that for a second. Just kidding. But from a real estate investing perspective, I
Yeah.
pretty much add value to people in 3 different ways. I educate, or I can help teach. Whether you're learning, interested in personal finance or creative finance, so you can always connect with me on Instagram. So that's Michael MNAT, Mike November Alpha Tango. That's on Instagram. So Michael MNAT. Other things that I do is we always bring on, we have private money partners, people who want to buy deals with us. So they are the lender on the money, and then we co-own the property. Or if you want to just be a lender for a fixed interest rate. And then sometimes we don't buy every property. So we're also able to sell some of our potential real estate deals that we can sell to you. So it's kind of the 3 ways, is if people want to connect on learning, lending, or buying some of our deals. So it's the 3 ways
LLB.
to me. Awesome.
Well, a really quick question. Do you also acquire multifamily? Is a single family? Kind of where do you kind of find yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So my bread and butter has historically been in the small multifamily space, the 2 to 20 unit space. Right now, recently, because of the market shift, we've had a lot of success with our single family properties that we're purchasing subject to their existing loan. Essentially, we're buying the properties, and the loan stays in the seller's name. What the good thing about that is, usually if we're buying those properties, we're taking over 2, 3, 4% interest rates, and it's really hard to pass those types of deals up right now. And that's much more common in the single family home space than the multifamily. So we're focusing a lot more on that, but really anything between 1 to 20 units is kind of where we specialize, creative financing in particular.
That's great. Well, it's been wonderful, Michael. I really appreciate you joining and taking time out of your day to discuss your strengths. And yeah, I'm super excited to see your success and continued success.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you.